Well, good evening, Mayor, Council, and our guests. Tonight is the January 11th, 2021 Council briefing. We have a handful of items to go over with you tonight, four that are on the agenda. I do have two items that I'd like to bring up with you at the very end of the council meeting. One is to talk about an upcoming policy regarding property disposition, and the other is talk a little bit about vaccinations for COVID-19, which I think is an issue that you've probably all been getting peppered with questions on from seniors in our community. But I would like to dive into the first item, which is the Independent Enterprise Resource Planning Assessment. For the new council members, this is a project that has actually been going on in the city of Jacksonville Beach for multiple years. I believe the project actually initiated back in 2016-17 timeframe. The city has spent a significant amount of both time, resources, and financial resources on the project up to this point in time. We had hit some roadblocks with regards to progressing further with the project. And so several months ago, we approached council to bring in a third-party independent firm to perform an audit of how we were doing as a team on implementing this particular software. So I'm going to turn the helm over to Ashley Gossett, our CFO, who will talk a little bit about what the project is and then introduce you to the team with Gartner that performed the assessment. So with that, Ashley, the helm is yours.
Okay, thank you. As Mike stated, we began the process of updating our 30-year-old business application software in early 2017. And to date, we've only been able to implement one of the three modules we purchased as part of our Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP project. Like Mike said, because we've invested considerable resources in this project, we want to ensure that the final product is the best suit for the city. As Mike said, we engaged Gartner in August, and Gartner is a leading independent and research advisory firm, and they have in-depth experience working with state and local governments to evaluate ERPs and develop corrective action plans. So with us today, we have Carlton MacArthur and Nitesh Nagpal from Gartner, and they're going to present their assessment and answer any questions you might have. And having said that, I'll turn it over to Carlton to start the presentation.
Thank you, Ashley, and good evening, everyone. I'm pulling up my screen, so you should be able to see my presentation momentarily. Can you see it now? All right. So as Ashley mentioned, my name is Carlton MacArthur, and I am the Gartner Consulting Associate Partner that led our assessment of the city's Tyler Munis ERP implementation. So the focus of our presentation this evening is to provide you an overview of our assessment in terms of what are our findings and the city's readiness to move forward with the implementation, to give you an understanding of what our initial recommendations are, and then how the city can move forward with restarting the implementation so it can be successful in the not too distant future. Along with me is my colleague, Nitesh Nagpal, that led the actual assessment on a day-to-day basis, and he will be able to answer your more detailed questions. So as Ashley mentioned, you actually brought Tyler in 2016 to start the replacement of your 30-year-old SunGard legacy ERP system. The scope of Tyler's initiative was to do the configuration and implementation of several core modules that would help you increase the operational efficiency and effectiveness of the city's operations. These being finance and accounting, payroll and HR, as well as utility billing. Since this implementation has been underway, the city has been able to successfully implement the finance module. However, payroll, HR, utility billing are still, let's say, in flight, and the city has been unable to successfully implement these modules due to several challenges that we'll get into in just a few moments. So as a result of the extended time frame that has actually taken the city to get the project to this far, as well as the resources and the commitment that has been obligated to this engagement. They brought us in to do an in-depth analysis to help you figure out what's working well, what needs to be improved, how it can be improved, and to develop a detailed set of recommendations and roadmaps to lead you through that improvement process. So with this engagement, we leveraged our program assurance framework that we use to assess ERP implementations of this sort. As Ashley mentioned, we do a lot of audits and assessments of ERP implementations across state and local, as well as educational institutions and on the federal level. So we have a very rigorous and proven framework that we've been able to walk the city through to do a very detailed and in-depth analysis to get a baseline understanding of where the city is with its implementation. I think it's important to note that we interviewed a number of key stakeholders that have been involved in this implementation process, as well as had interviews with Tyler to make sure that we have a fair and impartial understanding of where the project is and why it's in its current state. So as you can see at the top of my slide, there are 5 assessment categories that we evaluated the implementation against, with 3 of them having highly impacted the success of the project in not being able to meet your requirements. Those being strategy and leadership, project controls, and end-user implementation. And I'll address each of them individually in just a few moments. Additionally, we looked at the technology that Tyler was implementing through Munis, and how well the city, as well as Tyler, was handling the conversion and management of data out of the legacy environment into Munis. So several of the key findings that I would like to bring to your attention are listed below. So first off, from a strategy and leadership perspective, we observed that at the outset of this engagement, a comprehensive strategy and business case were not defined. Typically, when you do an ERP engagement, you start with a strategy, that being outlining what is your vision, what are your guiding principles, what are the objectives that you are looking to accomplish, as well as having a corresponding business case along with that that provides an ROI and what the projected benefits are going to be as a result of migrating to the new system. We did not see that in this instance, and this contributed to a lack of vision, as well as shifting requirements and business priorities throughout this engagement. So that within itself is somewhat of a red flag when you don't have an anchoring strategy that you're going to move forward with driving your transformation effort. And in this case, the implementation of Tyler, Munis, when that's lacking. Additionally, we did not observe that the project had the appropriate level of controls and governance in place. And this led to the project schedule being extended, and you're not being able to sustain the necessary momentum and stakeholder engagement to make the project successful in getting buy-in from the business community. Furthermore, we observed that there were several leadership changes throughout the course of this engagement. And each time there was some form of leadership change, that introduced a new way of managing the project, that introduced new vision into the engagement. So there was some relative lack of stability that contributed to the project not being as successful as the city would like. We also noted that disciplined project management, as well as government management, vendor management practices were inconsistently applied. As a prime example, the city has been paying for the utility billing module. However, the city has not been able to work with Tyler to successfully implement that module to date, but you're still paying for the software and services that are associated with it. We feel that had the appropriate vendor management and project management controls been in place, then this may not have been such a problematic issue as we had observed. Additionally, the project was under-resourced and staffed from the city's perspective. There were not full-time dedicated resources, particularly a project manager that was dedicated to this engagement to make sure that it had the appropriate level of oversight and controls. And risk and issues were not proactively mitigated and managed. So as you look at each of these issues collectively, it sort of led to the project being in what we call a red status, meaning pause the project, determine where you are, how you need to move forward, where does this fit within the overall strategy and priorities for the city, and then how do you best resource it and manage it to move it forward in a way that can help you achieve the greatest return on investment. Also think it's important to note that some of the observations that we identified are not unique to the city of Jacksonville Beach. In many instances, undertaking an ERP implementation is one of the more challenging technology endeavors that municipalities embark upon. So we don't want this to seem as this is an indictment against the city and that this is something that we don't see. We commonly see these. However, there's several notable ones around the strategy, project controls, and just how the overall implementation was being managed that contributed to the negative impacts on this particular engagement. So as a result of our findings, we were able to develop 3 options for the city to consider for how to restart this ERP implementation and do it successfully. The 3 options are, 1 is to stay the course. In looking at the capabilities and modules that Tyler has, we have seen them be able to successfully implement these sorts of systems in the marketplace with other municipalities. However, if you want to stay the course with Tyler, you'll first have to start with refining the existing requirements that you have and prioritize them. We were able to notice that the city in some instances were looking to do heavy configuration to align with its business processes or ways of doing work, which were somewhat contrary to how Tyler had developed its technologies. So you'll have to really look at resetting expectations through your priorities and saying, if these are the requirements that we are going to move forward with, then we have to make the necessary adjustments on the city side to align your business processes with those requirements. Then you also have to spend some time validating the extent to which Munis is able to meet those requirements. I would say if it's going to require Tyler to do customization, which they are not likely to do to its technologies, then you probably need to look at going option B or C, which is start over or use somewhat of a hybrid approach. But if you are able to determine that the technology will meet your requirements and the city is going to be flexible and adaptable enough to change its business processes to meet those technology requirements, then you can move forward with Tyler, and in so doing, getting the appropriate add-on solutions that may be necessary to meet your specific business needs. Lastly, you would need to develop a very detailed project plan and schedule, and then dedicate a project manager to working with Tyler to make sure that the requirements are being met on schedule and within budget to meet your requirements. The second option is to start over. And that essentially means going back to a blank sheet of paper, saying we're moving away from Tyler Munis, and you're going to go back to the drawing board to, 1, outline your strategy, establish the guiding principles for how the project is going to be executed, and then develop a business case to determine what the technology investments are going to be and how long it would actually take for a systems integrator to do the necessary implementation or configuration and implementation. Once you have that strategy in place, you would have to go to the market with an RFP, defining what those in-scope capabilities are. And in this instance, with you starting over, you would be looking to procure a solution that can help you with finance, HR, payroll, and utility billing. And this could take a considerable amount of time because it would entail not only developing an RFP, but also selecting a software vendor, a systems integrator, and then getting them on board so that they can actually start the configuration and implementation. Then the hybrid option would allow you to, one, continue using the finance and procurement modules within Munis that have already been implemented. Then you would need to complete the implementation of HR and payroll in Munis, and then bring in another vendor to support utility billing. When you look at finance, procurement, HR, and payroll, those are somewhat commoditized business processes that can be configured to get the symbiotic relationship between the process and the technology. However, utility billing, that is very different. And there is some additional due diligence that needs to be done to really understand if Tyler can meet your utility billing requirements. And what we've observed at a high level thus far is probably worth going in a different direction from a technology perspective to meet your utility billing requirements. So let's talk about sort of the strengths and weaknesses of each one of these options. So first off, we did do a suitability analysis to determine which of these options is most likely to meet the city's requirements. And in discussion with the business community as well as technology community, there was a collective decision made that option C is the most preferred option for moving forward. So the advantages that you get out of the hybrid option is, one, you don't have the sunk cost of what you've already spent associated with finance, procurement, HR, and payroll. You can continue the implementation of these particular modules, provided that you do the necessary refinement of your requirements, prioritize them, and then get the right project discipline around the engagement. This option also would help you do fewer functional trade-offs, because out of the box, Tyler can meet a number of your requirements without having to do customization. It can give you that functional agility that you're looking for, again, provided that you can excuse me, make the necessary changes to your technology, to your business processes to align to your technology. And then it allows you to go to market to get the right solution to meet your utility billing needs. However, some of the things that you need to consider from a potential disadvantages perspective is that this is going to bring more complexity into your technology environment, because you'll have to do the appropriate interface and integration between Munis, a utility billing system, and any other systems that you want to bring in to your ecosystem to support the end-to-end functioning of the business processes that I named previously. Also, this has the option to potentially drive your implementation cost higher because of the necessary configuration that you'll need to do to Tyler, the configuration that you'll need to do to a utility billing solution, and the maintenance cost of maintaining multiple systems. So that's option C. Option A would stay in the course. The advantages here is you have no sunk cost. You already have requirements outlined, and you can put the right project management disciplines and controls in place to make sure that you're driving Tyler towards your designated end state. With this option, it's less complexity because you're working in a monolithic or single stack solution. And we estimate the time to realize your benefits may be less because you've already started down this path. You're not having to start over, or you're not having to go an alternate path. However, there are risks with this option. One is, will Tyler be willing to work with you to really refine those requirements and make the necessary adjustments to their technology? Will the city be willing to modify its business processes to appropriately use the technology solution? So will the appropriate give and take be there between Tyler and the city? Once you're able to determine that, there needs to be a cost benefit analysis to determine what are the costs that it will take to do the extensive configuration, specifically of the utility billing module, to meet your requirements. You may discover that you can go to another solution, get that out of the box functionality for a cheaper price, but that cost benefit analysis needs to be performed in order to determine that. And then again, do the configuration. And then we don't feel that this is going to give you necessarily the agility or business outcomes that you need to meet your requirements. And then lastly is starting over. And I would say this is the least preferred option. You will incur some cost with this option. You will increase the timeline to realize your benefits because you're basically going back to the drawing board, which basically means you're going to continue working in a hybrid environment of Tyler as well as SunGard, and you're going to be on a system that is very, let's say, outdated, and you're going to experience a lot of technical obsolescence going forward with this option. So when you look at the attributes of each one of the options that we've laid out, option C is the best option for you to move forward. So even before moving forward, we recommend the city take some of the actions that we've outlined below, irrespective of the options that are chosen. And we think these, or feel these options are, recommendations are really essential, because if you don't take some of these steps, you can find yourself in a very similar situation 6 months or a year from now, regardless of the technology solution you move forward with. So if you don't do the things such as getting the project governance and structure in place, outlining the business case and the guiding principles for what you're trying to achieve, even if you brought in SAP, Oracle, or Workday, you may very well find yourself in the same position. Getting the right project management controls, governance, and vendor management are table stakes for any type of ERP implementation. So you should do this before actually choosing a scenario. And we estimate that it would take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, just based on practices that we've observed with working with other clients and with speaking with the project team that we supported, that you should be able to do this in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. So there was an executive steering committee in place. It's getting that committee in place, outlining roles and responsibilities, getting their commitment and buy-in for moving this forward is going to be essential. In selecting the option, there needs to be ongoing assessment and discovery. Again, that gets into refining the requirements to make sure that you are making the right choice between staying the course, starting over, or coming up with a hybrid solution. Developing a business case around it, and then establishing what we call a RACI. So it's really outlining who is responsible, accountable, who needs to be coordinated and informed around each of the key business requirements for moving forward. There needs to be some change management put in place for this endeavor so that you get the necessary buy-in and support from your key stakeholders in understanding what training will be necessary to actually move forward with an ERP implementation, and then creating a plan to address the resource capacity gaps, meaning getting a project manager in place and dedicating the appropriate level of city resources to this engagement. And then after you've been able to select the solution, it's starting to execute that organizational change management plan, moving forward with some strategic communications around what the decision is and what the way ahead is for the implementation, bringing in the appropriate level of resourcing, and then working with the integrator to develop that detailed project management plan and schedule that will detail how the implementation and integration will be done. And with that, I'll pause to see if there are any questions or comments on the presentation.
I've got a question on, go back to your previous screen.
Okay.
I think it was page 6. Yeah, that one. The one thing that caught my eye was in B, start over halfway through, they're upgrading to new technology reduces the risk of technical obsolescence. Did you see any evidence of obsolescence in where we're sitting right now?
With where you're sitting now with the Tyler implementation, so the version of the finance module that you're on that will give you the functionality that you need. Of course, what you have today is obsolescent in SunGard, but in moving forward with this option, it can definitely reduce the ability for technical obsolescence. So in starting over, the intent would be going to the latest and greatest and proven technologies around each one of these business capabilities. But I would say no, what you're on now from a Tyler perspective is not obsolescent. And in fact, one of the modules that you were looking to implement, I think was for payroll, if I'm not mistaken, that was the latest version that they were coming out with, and they made it in, I think it was a beta version. Yep. So you all were one of the first adopters of it, and since then some of the challenges that they had have been since worked out. So there is no obsolescence at the moment.
And I guess, Mike, one question would probably be more for you is how important is it that the utility billing talk to the other levels that are already in place?
Did Mike hear that you mentioned his name in that question?
I don't, probably not. Mike,
I think he was addressing that one to you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Dan, could you repeat that one more time, please?
Yeah. So when it comes to the utility billing module, how important is it that module speaks to the other modules? I mean, are they reliant upon each other, or is it very, I don't know.
It's important that they speak from the standpoint of financial accountability. Ashley might be able to better address the question, but my understanding is, utility billing speaks to revenue collection and therefore needs to be reconciled against our general ledger. So ultimately, those two modules need to be able to speak to one another.
Yeah, if I could follow up on what Mike's saying, because the utility billing is our subsidiary level for, billing and cash receipting. it's a one-way data push. And so if we were to go to a different provider, we would just need to make sure we had a proper import system so we have the financial accountability. But since the data is moving in one direction to the general ledger, it would be possible to utilize a different software provider.
Yeah, that would only be my one fear is that making sure that two different softwares can communicate clearly.
And-
So we
and with
got,
the-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and with the latest ERP systems, it's not a very difficult lift from a technology perspective to do the interface and integration. Either through an enterprise service bus or through iPaaS, which is integrated platform as a service. These systems can typically talk to one another fairly seamlessly.
Are you good on that question, Dan?
Yes. Does anybody know if we work off SQL servers? I'll take that as a no.
I'm
I
not
certainly-
sure we have information systems on the line. I know what you're asking with regards to our enterprise database software. I'm not sure what platform that is that we use.
So
Okay.
I had a question, Mr. MacArthur, about so we got finance and accounting implemented, and then we got to payroll and HR, and at some point there is where we got held up. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? And then why, if that's where we got held up in this implementation, and I'm assuming they weren't necessarily linear, but
Mhm.
why do we think that with option C, with the hybrid model, that we'll be able to pick back up with payroll and HR? Are we just going to have to let go of some of the customization that we were trying to do and just be more practical with the implementation of, or our expectations of it?
I think that's exactly right. Some of the things that the city was looking to do from an HR and payroll perspective, I think were fairly unique and not necessarily aligned to industry standard. So that's where the breakdown occurred, where the city was looking for very specific things, and it was challenging for Tyler to meet some of those requirements because they build these systems for what I call like the 80-20. They want to make sure that it fits 80% of their user base, and then you can do some form of customization or point solution to meet that remaining 20%. But in this case, that 20% was creeping up to more, let's say like 40 or 50%. So that's where the breakdown occurred. And I think the city, again, just needs to be more willing and adaptable to align with the out-of-the-box functionality with Tyler, provided that there will be some configuration done. And if they're very specific and unique requirements, that's when you bring in some of those point solutions. So I'll take, for example, pension. Tyler's not a pension system, but if pension is one of the core HR or payroll capabilities that need to be executed, then you need to bring in another pension-based system that will support that specifically. But again, as I mentioned, it's really around prioritizing what are the must-haves.
Well, that was great because my next question was about pension. So,
Okay.
so we would, because this did come up in our pension board that, so we would have to look for another solution for pensions that would integrate with Tyler, or just a completely separate standalone, like we would with utility billing.
Well, if you move forward
Or
with
does it just
Tyler
depend?
for HR and payroll, there will need to be some form of, and finance, there will need to be some integration between Munis as well as a pension system.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from council at this point? Ashley or Carlton, do you want to speak as to what the next steps are with the city from here? Maybe that's a kickback to Ashley at this point.
So at this point, we're taking the recommendations that Gartner's given us, what's on the screen right now, the immediate actions. And so we've taken some steps to start forming a project charter and reevaluating the project scope and our must-have and would like to have items. We anticipate bringing something back in front of council with our recommendations in the near future.
Who was the prior team leader and who's going to be taking this forward as the team leader internally?
That's part of the conversation we're going to be having as far as that step one before choosing a scenario. We've had some preliminary meetings on reinitiating the project governance structure and the responsibilities. We do have someone on staff that we're considering as the project manager. The question is, do they have the appropriate time to allocate to do nothing more than be the project manager 100% of the time for this project? Or are there outside responsibilities that would take away from it? So it truly is the next several weeks, us doing an internal assessment to determine what we need for outside help to be able to go through all the steps that you see here that are laid out in these first 3 boxes, and ultimately to get us across the finish line to success. We may need some assistance at the front end as well as at the middle and back end, but we don't know until we actually have those honest conversations internally. Well, if there's no other questions at this point, I will thank the team from Gartner and Carlton for the information that you've all provided tonight. Again, this was meant to be a snapshot or a report card to the council. You knew that we had hired the outside consultant to perform this assessment. These are the results of the assessment. We are still working through how we are going to proceed going forward. And when we have that recommended solution, we will come back to you to tell you what that solution is, what our need might be for resources to help move us forward, and hopefully a time frame for the reboot of those last 2 phases of the project to get us across the line.
Mike, is there a report associated with this or just the presentation?
There's actually a slide deck report, and Ashley, I believe you have the electronic copy, correct?
Yes, I do. And we'll distribute that to council.
Thank you.
Yep, we'll send that out to all of you.
Can you document or just put together the list of what we spent on this project so far, just for the new council members to know what a significant endeavor it's been up to this point?
We sure can.
Thank you.
I think when we came to you for the authorization to proceed with Gardner doing the evaluation, we had done a financial analysis up to that point in time. We will update those numbers and distribute it out with the electronic slide deck from Gardner. Okay, thank you, Gartner. We'll move on to the second item of our agenda for tonight, which is year 2 review of the golf course performance. For the new council members, you're probably aware that 2 years ago in November, we did renovations out at the golf course in excess of $1 million. Since that time, the city has continued to make continuous improvements out there at the course. We've also been getting a lot of play at that particular facility. And we have our new team of Bruce Moeller and Trevor Hughes that are managing both the business aspect of the course as well as course quality itself. I asked them to perform a year 2 report card for you, the council, so that you can see how the investment that the city made is paying off. Talk a little bit about their accomplishments over the last year and what they have upcoming for this year. So with that, I will turn it over to Bruce, who will start off with the administrative components. Take it away.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Yeah, we've done a lot. The renovation took place back in 2018, and it was an 8-month renovation that encompassed. I'm going to let Trevor speak a little bit closer to the details of the renovation, exactly what took place. But yeah, we've got it's been a very busy place for the 3 new council members that haven't been on board, but we're very excited about the product we've got in front of us and the success that we've had even prior to COVID. COVID has obviously helped us a great deal. But the mission of the golf course is to provide a top quality experience through exceptional customer service and customer conditions and competitive pricing. So we have done a number of different, we've been fortunate in getting everything that we've got here in front of us. From a technology side of it, everything that we've got is server-based. So we've been very lucky that pre-COVID, everything we did was almost like COVID-driven, that we have computers that all of our starters, cart staff, everyone has it. Everything's touchless already. So when COVID came, we were kind of already set in place. We were ready for the renovation and everything that we've done in place for that. So the number of charity events, the club championship, the city championships that we've done, the international events we've done, we've been very fortunate to get all of these events that, normally we haven't seen at Jack's Beach in years past. Social media marketing has helped a lot with a number of different groups and relationships that we've built with area groups that have really helped us, well post the renovation that have helped us get better. We've created the shade shelters that we got council approval for, thank God. So we got close to $80,000 worth of the shade shelters that we are now building, that we've done, at this point. I'm gonna let Trevor speak to that in a few minutes as far as the golf course. Yeah, so so far so good. We've been really, really fortunate to get everything with council approval, with city manager approval. Everything that we've done so far has been a huge success for us. The shade shelters, we've got speakers in place. We've got speakers coming to help us announce, a number of different groups, individuals, speakers. With regards to I'm at a loss for words here. Sorry. Okay. The music that we've got coming. We've got lights for driving range, and hopefully by the fall, I think, is when we'll get everything done. So we've been very fortunate to get. We've been lucky. I don't know that there's a whole lot of places in Florida. We've called anywhere from 15 to 20 different places, municipalities in the state of Florida, to see how many places have done as much as we've done, and we have yet to see a golf course that did 53,000 rounds or so their first year. We were also a little handicapped that our first year started in November 10th. Second year started, first full year, and our first calendar year we did 69,000 rounds. So there's not many golf courses in the state of Florida that have done this many rounds. So at some point here, we're going to have to, figure out some sort of way to go back to a nominal number. And we've had a number of council briefings that we're trying to find that number of what is perfect for us, 40,000, 50,000, 55,000. But it close to 70,000 rounds a year, there's got to be some sort of wear and tear that takes place in the golf course. So Trevor Hughes and I are really working hard to figure out exactly what that mixture is, what that, seamless, it's just, we can't, we're not quite there. But with this much play, we're going to have to figure out ways at some point here in the next 6 months to try to mitigate play, whether it's a rate increase or blocking tee times or whatever we have to do to try to manage the amount of play that we have. So I'm going to let Trevor talk about exactly what was done to the golf course, because yes, we've made some money, but I think big picture, and I think we've spoken with council since day one on this, that we've been very fortunate, very successful, but at the end of the day, the money we're making, we need to be careful. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of, foundational issues that Trevor's going to talk about here in just a second that we need to address in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. So if I can hand it over to Trevor Hughes, our golf course superintendent, because everything we've done is from the city championship, from individual events. None of this is possible. The play that we've had, from sun up to sundown, we were pre-COVID. And I think when COVID started back in March, the main difference between what we're doing now and what we're doing pre-COVID was we weren't turning away 100 people a day. We were turning away 25 people a day. So that's the main difference for us. It's, none of this is possible. The city championship, the international events that we've had, the junior events that we've had, none of it's possible without the conditions that Trevor Hughes and his staff are able to provide us. So I'll turn it over to Trevor to talk about exactly some of the things that we've done in the last couple of years. And Trevor?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, in 2018, the course closed January. We underwent a renovation that included all greens, new irrigation around greens. It also included some course routing changes that helped increase the play, as well as some safety concerns. But from my point of view, the bones of the course that got impacted were really only 3 acres. The rest of the golf course is still 1984 irrigation, old 1960s common Bermuda grass. And it's good for a municipal course, but with the high rounds of traffic, with the winter we've had, it's going to be tough. So we're prepared. And the next, I'm sorry, we're prepared here to. These dogs have gotten me off my. I'm sorry. Breeze must have saw some geese. We have several. I'm sorry. We have several things going on currently. As some of you guys may or may not know, the golf course is an old landfill. There's lots of old debris that's come to the surface, and we do have money budgeted for this year to help mitigate some of the glass, some of the debris. But ultimately, our goal and our business plan is to save enough money to fully renovate the course through the enterprise fund.
Any questions as far as the golf course goes the last couple of years? I'm sure there's like 1,000 things that Georgette and Sandy and Corey have asked a million times over the last couple of years, but anything that we can answer at this point that hadn't been asked yet?
So I have one question, but before I say that, I have to say that our course strikingly resembles Amen Corner, which I think is pretty impressive.
It does. It's pretty good. Trevor's done a great job. Thank you.
How are you feeling about the condition of our clubhouse?
Welcome to City Council. Yeah, it's not, Dan, to be frank with you, I think it's, they renovated in 03 or 04. I may be mistaken. Maybe someone can speak on that. But I feel like they renovated in 03 and 04 to look like we were like in 1984. I mean, there's a few things that we got to work on. There's no question about that. I'm guessing most everyone's been there, but the atrium area, the porte-cochere in the front that was recently hit by a truck, there's a few changes need to be made. And I think logistically speaking, I think we got to look at it objectively and say what is monetized, what can we do to make money for the city, what makes sense for the customer. So as far as the golf shop is the golf building, I guess, there's a lot of things to be desired in the next, 2, 3, 5 years for sure.
And for Councilor Jansen and the other new council members, for your edification, a little over a year ago, one of the things I worked with Parks and Recreation and the golf course on was putting together a 3-year business plan for the golf course itself. One of the things I wanted to make sure is that the fundamentals of the course are appropriately being maintained so that there's a continued desire to play the course and a continued revenue stream coming in. They chip away at those goals to maintain the course and continue the improvements at the driving range and secure food vendor for the facility itself. We're going to start taking a look at some of those ancillary services and also the building itself for out years of the business plan. One of the things we're trying to do is to keep that a rolling 3 years, not a static 3 years. So Bruce had some ideas right out of the box when we first put the plan together. And Bruce knows I pulled back on the reins a little bit and said, let's focus on the fundamentals first that base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And once we get those locked in and we have the revenue stream to keep working at that, then let's talk the next level, which is making the improvements at the clubhouse and providing some of those supplemental services that may provide a benefit to the residents and either break even or provide additional revenue streams to the city.
I just, excuse me, just want to say, for someone that operates a golf course on a daily basis, what these two guys have done is fantastic and phenomenal. To make money on a golf course is difficult to begin with. To make the amount of money that these guys have made on this golf course this year is huge. Round of play are way up due to COVID. Will that settle down a little bit? I think it will, and help these guys with the grass. Someone who plays out there a bit, played in the city championship out there. I mean, couldn't have heard. I mean, these players are used to playing some of the best courses in the city, and we were right up there with them. For that asset to be, here in Jacksonville Beach is huge. Only golf course east of Intercoastal, public golf course. I think the closest one that you have to find is up in Amelia Island. It's fantastic. I do want to give a little shout out to Trevor and the job that he's done out there on the course, and the job that Bruce has done as well, managing the course. And I mean, operating income of almost $350,000, unheard of in the golf industry. Guarantee you that's tops around North Florida for any public or private or semi-private course. So this is a huge asset to the city. That's all I kind of want to say for someone who does this on a daily basis.
Councilor
Thank
Nichols?
you, Chet.
I agree. Bruce and Trevor, I mean, y'all are doing fantastic. Y'all know what I think about what y'all are doing, and keep it up. It's just thoroughly impressive. And I guess my concern is just always the level of play that we're getting, that is too much. And, it's, we just want to make sure the course stays in good condition. And I know you've got some plans for that. So just appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah, I think Trevor and I we had a little bit of a tough, and Trevor wants to speak, he certainly can, but we had a tough winter. We had a freeze on December 3rd that we hadn't had in the last couple of years. We've had a couple since then. So yeah, there's some things that sting the golf course from a weather side of it that we're doing the best we can to control, and Trevor and his crew are doing a remarkable job. He and I are working together to do whatever we can on the tee sheet side of it to make it so we have, great golf conditions again in springtime when the grass starts growing again. So it's been an awkward year, to say the least, as far as 2020 goes. And Trevor and I have been diligently working on making sure that we, continue to have the golf course conditions that we expect to have at Jax Beach.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Trevor, for that year 2 presentation to council. For council members, if you ever want to get a tour of the golf course and see some of the improvements that have been made and some of the upcoming project areas that they're working on, feel free to reach out and we'll get you set up with a tour of the course. You can even see the $200,000 worth of trees that we got installed at the course with the assistance of Councilor Nichols and some of the representatives over at Jacksonville.
I just want to see, how are they looking, Bruce?
Well, like Trevor said, they wanted to take some pictures of them, and it's not the time of year to take pictures of the trees for the most part. This is they're not the best looking trees in January, but we're happy to take pictures come June, July, August when they're actively growing. But they're doing great.
I'll be out there. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Trevor.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
With that, we will move on to item 3, which is the update of the paid parking program for year 2. This is a little bit different than the previous items, which were somewhat informational. This one, we're actually seeking some direction from council. We do have the option of entering into year 3 of the agreement with SP Plus for the provision of service. Last year, when we talked with council about the first year performance, there was some question about whether or not council wanted to expand the paid parking program within the city, either the number of days per week that we're currently charging, the months per year, or possibly look at some alternate locations as well. So with that being said, I did ask the 2 departments that are responsible for the parking program put together some information for you so you can take a look at it. We have both the police department and finance office here to talk a little bit about this. We're going to approach it in 2 steps. The first is to talk about the operation, and the second is talk about the financials. So with that, I will turn it over to the police department with Chief Smith and Commander Shaughnessy to give us a little background on the operations this year.
You don't need me here. Good evening, council. I'll be brief with my opening remarks. We've had paid parking since the beginning, since we started this years ago, and it fit best under the services division. Out of the 3 divisions, we put it under services, and Commander Shaughnessy's been supervising the operational piece of this since finance has stepped in and shared some of the load with us, which we're very appreciative of. So I'll turn it over to Commander Shaughnessy with a quick review of the high points for this past year with the challenges with COVID and everything else.
All right, good evening, everyone. So the 2020 review, the dates on that were March 13th, 2020 to November 1st of 2020. And we run the paid parking section, or the paid parking program, like the chief said, through the services section. And I rely heavily on the parking enforcement coordinator, which is Dan Fox. We were concerned with the operational of the day-to-day tasks. So what we did through Dan Fox's coordination is we put 2 community service officers, what we call CSO2s, part-time employees. We deployed those folks into those lots this year, taking out the overtime police officer. We felt with the number of patrol units and the scheduling we have with downtown Cape and the downtown area, that would be good staffing. And we had minimal calls for service, if any, in those lots. No major calls to speak of either. So that was really the day-to-day, taking out the COVID and the beach closures and things like that. There really wasn't much more to talk about on that. Of particular interest to the council from last year moving into this year were the addition of 4 15-minute parking spaces that we put in the downtown area. And those, just for a quick review, they're on 1st Avenue North, 2nd Avenue North, 3rd Avenue North, and 5th Avenue North. And those seem to work out well. Some of the signage became an issue as well. They were using the old A-frame sandwich board type signs. So we asked them to redo those. Some of the other signs were kind of muted into the background. So we redid those signs, put them more at an eye level when you pull into the parking lots, driving folks to the kiosks and things like that, which seemed to help as well. In addition to that, I will say with the signage this year, SP Plus put up signs, and they have a local office here in Jacksonville. So we drove a lot of that Q&A from customers on parking and parking disputes and citations and things like that. SP Plus put up a sign with a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They have a local 904 phone number. So that took a lot of pressure. That took a lot of calls off Dan Fox here, directing those calls, like I said, for traffic, for parking disputes and how to pay a ticket. They didn't understand the dates, the times, and things like that. So that was very beneficial too on the sign as well. This year they kicked off a phone application as well. And according to Dan, I'll go back to Dan because I rely so heavily on him. Dan thought that SP Plus put just a better trained employee out here this year. They were more customer focused. They were out really helping folks get to the kiosks. Once they saw congestion at the kiosks, they were driving these folks to the phone application so they didn't have to stand in line, and they seemed to like it better. Coming this year, there's some type of texting function that's coming as well. They can pay by text. I don't have all the information on that, but that's something they'd like to start for 2021 as well. Let's see.
Resident parking.
Resident parking. Yeah, we spoke about the resident parking concern, and we spoke with Ashley about that. So right now, our recommendation going into 2021 is that we keep it status quo, and we probably go ahead and take a look at that. and purge some of those records, old records going into 2022.
We feel that's the most labor intensive piece for us is starting the list, and it's just by feeling and it's anecdotal, but we feel with COVID and we kind of lost a year, although we've been profitable. We would like to, with the council's permission, keep the list as is and add new customers this year, and maybe look at next year, purging the list and starting all over. And like I said, it's a feeling. We think that the list is, we're cost benefit wise, we're better off just going with the current list of residents that we may lose a little bit of money, but it won't cost as much, nearly as much as us starting the whole list over again. We would recommend going with the current list this year and maybe revisiting it next year and starting over again. That's all I have, Mike.
Thank you, police. And with that, we'll switch over to Ashley. If you'd touch a little bit on the financial impacts of paid parking for this year.
Sure. So the memo went out to council ahead of the briefing, and so I'll just touch on the highlights. The bottom line is the paid parking program actually sustained itself. The cost of the CSOs, the divisional cost, was $95,000 in the year, and the city recorded revenues of $161,000. So with SP Plus, we're seeing for the first time that the paid parking program does support itself. And with previous years and previous vendors, we were not seeing that. We did see a decline in revenues this year from the prior year, and we attribute that to the changing behaviors with COVID. There were no special events. We didn't see the large crowds down here. So it was pretty impressive that it still was able to support the divisional costs. What we found was interesting when we were looking at the numbers is the resident participation was actually the same as last year. We did see a marked decrease in the number of paid vehicles, but this year we saw 2,716 residents utilize the program versus last year, 2,674. So that's my little fun fact on paid parking for y'all. So I think with that, if you have any questions about the revenues, there should be an attachment to the memo that gives you kind of a summary by month that supports the graphs that are in the memo. And that's all I have with regard to the financials.
Thank you, Ashley. Just to take a quick step back from the financials to the police department presentation for the benefit of the new council members, what Chief Smith was referring to with regards of the purging of the files, so to speak, it was very labor intensive to get the first round of residents in the city system for tracking, because we do have the no paid parking for city residents. This last year, rather than dump the spreadsheet and start over from scratch, we went with the assumption that those people on the spreadsheet, the overwhelming majority, are still going to be Jax Beach residents. So we merely indicated if they were still interested in being part of the program to send in an affirmative email to the city or another means of notification, we would just keep them on the list. What Chief Smith is referring to is doing that for one more year, for the third year of the program. And then when we go into year 4, we would basically purge and start over from scratch in order to reaffirm everyone who is truly a Jax Beach resident. We didn't think there would be enough change year to year to actually purge the system and go through the literally hundreds of man hours that it took to populate the initial database. So I just wanted to give you all that background as to why that particular recommendation is in front of you from the police department for year 3. With that, if you have any questions on the finances or the operations for either PD or finance.
Mike, I got a question. Is there any way that we can adjust our resident parking system in the slightest? And I'll tell you real quickly why. You would have had another resident count for the last 2 years if I could get my car put on the system. However, my car is not registered to my home address. My car is registered to my business address, which is in 32082. I've called the police department, called, and the whole system is tied to our license plates, which I understand, but is there any way to come up with a system to manually get some of those license plates? Because I know I'm not the only one that has issues with the system. And this is one small issue, but for me, it upsets me because I'm a taxpayer in the city for my home, and yet I can't park in Jax Beach. And there's several businesses that have multiple cars that are registered to a Jax Beach address, but they don't live in the city yet. And so all they would have to do is come drive to their business, get their business car, go park for free in the city. And I granted that's kind of a one-off scenario, but there's more than just me who are having this issue. I've had several people talk to me about it. There's still some resident concerns on the program and how to get it to where it makes sense and is a benefit that I feel like I deserve, and that several other people know that they deserve, but they can't do.
We actually encountered that issue in year one of the program and had a conversation about this last year at the conclusion of year one. Ultimately, the city drew the line where it drew the line for ease of application and minimum complexity. We had a number of residents who reached out with exactly the issue that you're talking about, where they live in Jax Beach, but their vehicle is registered outside of Jax Beach. We were also bombarded with people who live outside of Jax Beach, but own property in Jax Beach and wanted to have their cars be registered in Jax Beach as well. Ultimately, the license plate was still the simplest way to track residency. And if we go with what you're proposing, number one, we need to have a consensus from the rest of council to go in that direction. But we would have to do some manual labor-intensive efforts on the police department's side to enter all of that information manually. Chief Smith and Commander Shaughnessy, do either of you want to chime in with that? I know that Commander Crumley, I believe, was the one who addressed this issue last year, but if either of you have any information you want to add.
We both do. We certainly this year, correct, this has come up before. And I just want to remind council, this is all done manually on every single resident is done manually on an Excel spreadsheet. There's no magic program or anything. So for Mr. Stokes, for instance, he would have to come in. I'm working through this. We'd have to verify his license, his address, and then the car that's not registered in the city for everybody who wanted to do that. And along with 32250, which is Isle of Palms, we already have to exclude them. So it was more of a logistical operational concern that we had. And somebody would have, somewhere down the line, would have to make a judgment call. For instance, like Mr. Staphopoulos said, you live in town, but you own property out here. Where do you draw the line? And the last iteration of this was a council direction. Commander Shaughnessy.
That's pretty much summed it up. It's just, going back, it's just the labor intensive of moving all those papers, through those two. We have two employees here that do that, parking enforcement coordinator and one other CSO that handle all that.
And we can do anything. If you ask us to, we'll do it. I'm just for economy and for simplicity and lack of complexity. This is where council directed us. So I'll turn it back over to Mr. Staphopoulos.
So hopefully, Councilor Stokes, that answers your question of why we do it the way we do it. But obviously, if council wanted to do it a different way, we'd look for a consensus to do it a different way.
And I got the same response, 2 years ago when I called, and even last year when I called. For me, that's a resident that used to just go and show my driver's license and be able to park. It's difficult, and I know I'm not the only one, and thank you for backing me up that I'm not the only one. It makes me feel better. but it's a little bit of a change. And then, when we look to the summer months, especially with COVID, when we get out of COVID, maybe hopefully, and these 15-minute spots aren't enough for to go orders, what's going to happen? It's a labor intensive part on the front end, but I also could envision a labor intensive part on the back end with me parking for 5 minutes to run into V Pizza, for example, to get a pizza, and coming out and I've got a parking citation. And I'm going to call and say, well, guys, I'm a resident of Jax Beach. I went in, the 15-minute spot was taken. Am I still going to get that ticket? I don't know. That's a judgment call, I guess, on the citation part. But I just feel like there's going to be some issues down the road for that as well. Because if there's one, there's more of us that have that issue. And I've heard it a lot when I was out on the streets. A lot of people are still wanting to figure out how they can park and how we can streamline this program with SP Plus a little bit better. And maybe if there's something that they can do on their end, that would be beneficial. Some way for me to register in the app real quick. That's it.
Any other questions for staff from council?
I have a question for you, Mike. You said, does the city council wish to continue its agreement for the third service period? Is that the service period that begins in 2 months?
That is correct.
So if we said we didn't want to continue with SP Plus, then we'd have to scramble to find a new parking program in 2 months.
I can't see Commander Shaughnessy's head. It's too small on my laptop, but I'm presuming he's nodding.
And I'm not suggesting that. I would say that's kind of a little close if we did want to change the parking program. I'm fine with it staying as it is. I think especially given that year 2 was a completely unusual year in every respect. I would also say that we stay the course in terms of the days and hours of operation, because hopefully people are somewhat used to this program by now. With all that it takes to change over the program, I can't imagine doing that at this point, especially in such a tight turnaround. But I will say, I think we should keep an eye on the Beaches Town Center parking program. Flowbird, it is, I know they struggled a little bit with implementation and communication, but I have used it many times and it's very easy, and they include their street parking. So I think that's just something, as we come around, because this is only a 3-year, it's 3 one-year extensions, right? Or would the end of next year be the end of this contract?
Commander Shaughnessy, do you have the terms?
Yes, next year would be, but yes, there are 3 1 years after that. Yes.
3 1 years after that.
Yes.
Okay. So it just might be the time to, I don't suggest we change over now, but I do think we should probably spend the next, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it would take to just look around and make sure that this continues to be the best option for us. But if we've got a lot of people coming to the beach, getting used to the Flowbird app, that may also be a good argument for looking into that program as well.
Any other thoughts or comments from council?
Yeah, we'd have to also take consideration what Flowbird costs and versus what we're paying now. And, is there going to be a variance in that margin between what it's costing us and what are we making off the parking? But yeah, I'm open for a study.
We can certainly look to bring something back in the fall to council, which I think would give us optimum time constraints from the end of the parking season to the start of the next parking season to make some decisions about how we want to continue. So we'll make a note. I see Commander Shaughnessy jotting down there. We'll plan on bringing something back to the council, probably October timeframe of next year, to continue the discussions of how we proceed with the parking program.
October timeframe of this year, right?
Yes.
Just want to make sure. And I'm not advocating one way or the other, but it would be nice to know how that option would compare before we go to renew this one again.
Clearly, if there's a desire from council to try and line up our parking system with the same parking system that's being used in the other beach communities. That would be the starting point, I think, from the conversation, so that anyone coming over to the beaches, they're utilizing the same system from the north end all the way down to the border with St. Johns County. But we'll put it on the calendar and we'll bring something back in October of 2021 for discussions of what we do for the following year's parking program.
Hey, Mike, I would just say that I concur with Mayor Hoffman on keeping things the same this year as far as the dates and everything for now.
Fantastic.
Mike, since we're going to readdress in October, can we use this time between now and October to come up with some sort of solution for those of us residents who are having an issue with the current program? Whether it's a sticker or something that some of us can use. Those of us who have that issue, I feel like, there's a few of us and that would like to get this issue at least looked at and if we're going to come back and do things as is this year, given us 6-9 months to come up with some sort of solution for next year would be great.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind. I think it's going to be technology driven. Whatever the technology is that the different vendors are relying on in order to track the vehicle and what the level of workload imposed upon us becomes. Clearly there may be some companies out there that are 100% automated with people entering their information online, as opposed to us having to do it manually at the police department in a spreadsheet, as you heard the chief and the commander say. So clearly there may be some other options out there that have some benefits that go beyond not just a pricing structure or the ease of technology for the person to use in the field, but it may also be beneficial to us and the residents as well. So we'll keep that in mind. If there's no other comments on this topic, we'll jump into the fourth item for tonight, which is an update from Jacob Board, our communications manager, on the RFP process for a new website for the city. And Jacob, I'll let you take it away.
Right. Good evening, Council. Can everybody hear me? Great. Well, I'm excited to talk tonight, and I'm assuming a lot of you are excited as well, based on what I've heard in my year of employment here. So tonight we're just looking for council to support staff awarding this RFP for website design to the council meeting next week for formal consideration. So I'm just going to talk to you all a little bit about the process that we went through, and you can stop me along the way if you have any questions, or at the end, just let me know. So we probably started the process about 6 months ago, me reaching out to a lot of other cities for examples of their RFPs for new websites to make sure we were going in the right direction. And we had a committee of staff members from every department in the city that worked on that RFP for quite a while to make sure that we were getting what we thought would go towards a website that would really serve the city the best. And we came up with a pretty solid RFP, I think. I don't know if you've looked at our website recently, but it definitely needs some improvement. So we came up with 5 categories that we graded equally when we were looking for vendors, and categories that we needed the vendors to tell us what they were going to do to fix problems that we had, or come up with new ideas that would serve our community and visitors better. So came up with 5 categories: experience with local government communities. We obviously wanted whoever we were working with to be familiar with what's important to municipal governments. Then we wanted a solid set of features, functionality, and design. So, there's a lot of functions that are important for our website to function properly, and we wanted it to look good. The implementation plan, how exactly was a vendor or a company going to work with us to make sure that something that's very complex is rolled out smoothly and clearly to our citizens. Then fourth category was ongoing services. So that's including security, ADA compliance, and customer service going forward if we're having issues. And then the investment proposal and fees. So how much is it going to cost us to launch it and how much is it going to cost each year after that? So, you know, and then if you had a chance to read the RFP, it got really specific for the very specific things that we were looking for. But I think generally what we hear from council and what we hear from the community is we need the aesthetic improved of the website big time. We need the functionality to be improved. So if somebody wants to know who to call for the paid parking program, they shouldn't have to go to our website and click 17 different pages to find who to call. We want it to be easy for staff to use. You know, we should be able to onboard somebody, and we wanted it to be a easy to figure out system to quickly update, but to also update and make it look good in the future. And then we just, you know, wanted it to be a website that the city could be proud of. And again, I think one of the top priorities was ADA compliance. And we didn't want to rely on ourselves to keep it constantly updated for ADA compliance. We wanted a company that would stay on top of those rules and guidelines for us and be ahead of the curve. So that was something that was really, really important for us as well. So we launched the RFP in September. We sent it out to 28 different companies, as well as launching it, or as well as publishing it on our website. We had a question period of 2 weeks where we received over 200 questions from vendors that we had to answer. So that was interesting. And then we received 20 proposals. We had a committee of 6 city staff members that reviewed all the proposals. We narrowed it down to 3. And then had presentations from each of those 3 vendors, and then had another meeting with that same committee, and we ended up choosing Civic Plus, which I believe you have access to their proposal. So if you didn't get a chance to look at it, I encourage you to. We're really excited about Civic Plus and all the features and things that they can do for us. And I think it's worth noting that Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, and St. Augustine all use Civic Plus, and we've heard good things from all of them. So I'm here to answer questions if you have any.
Any questions for Jacob?
I just want to say, Jacob, it's nice to see your face and not just hear your voice on these Zoom calls. So thank you for this work. It's a huge undertaking, even just the RFP process. And a municipal website is really complicated. So I know that there was a lot that went into this. I did look at the proposal and at their some of the recommended city websites that they've done, and they didn't even have Neptune and Atlantic Beach on there, so I didn't even know that until now. But I looked at, I think, St. Augustine and Port Orange, and I mean, cities are pretty much, you know, the same basic things, and so you can see a lot of similarities in how they lay out their websites. But I think what I was most impressed by was that it's a little more interactive than a normal website. Normally, websites just push out information, but they are actually can set up an account, so you can get certain alerts when, you know, certain meeting agendas are posted. I also see that there's some opportunities to potentially consolidate some services, like they have emergency alert functions. So do we feel like we might be able to consolidate a couple different things that we're doing through other servers or providers?
I don't know if I can answer officially, but I think that is one of the huge pros of Civic Plus, that they have a huge suite of products other than just their website services. So we're also going to be looking at their clerking service for the clerk's office and putting out council agendas. You know, they have human resources services, they have the emergency alert services, they have parks and rec services. I think in this first phase, it's going to be the website and potentially the like the premium clerking service. but not 100% on what's all going to be in the contract for sure this first time.
Well, that's nice that we can add those things
Yes.
on once we get used to, or once we get the heavy lift of getting the website updated. The ADA compliance was also huge. I checked out our website, and I won't say it out loud on a recorded briefing, but so that's going to be a huge improvement. And I would say, you know, it's not as massive an undertaking as the ERP project, but the website's only going to be as good, and these tools are only going to be as good as how we use them. So I hope that once we do make this decision, it's a big investment that we use what's offered to us, and what we're paying for, quite frankly. So for the betterment, for the ease of the staff, for the constituents, for the council, everybody who's involved in any city function, this should be a benefit. So
And I think we'll probably hit on this more in the formal consideration, but another one of the big reasons that we're asking for approval for Civic Plus is because of their, we felt like their rollout plan was really, my only problem with it is I think it's too short. We'll need more time. But they have really great continuing education services, and you know, they're not just going to dump the website in our lap and leave. So I think there'll be a constant support.
Awesome.
Can they handle utility billing services, HR, finance, and no, I just want to say that you've done a great job from what I've read, and I appreciate the work that you put into it, Jacob.
It was a big team effort, so.
There's no other questions for Jacob. Oh, Councilor Stokes.
So it's not a huge cost in terms of things, but have we identified where the first year costs are? Because I'm sure is it in our technology budget at this current moment?
Yep, I think we had budgeted $50,000 for the project, and I think the proposal, including the first year fees, came in at around $48,000. So when we bring it for formal consideration the first time, and Karen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we'll be asking for permission to negotiate the contract, and then we'll bring it we'll bring the negotiated contract to council at the next meeting. So
that's correct. And I did want to point out too, we will be bringing it to you all for consideration to award the RFP. That would be next Tuesday, the 19th, and to authorization to negotiate a contract. At that point, we will be talking about some of those optional services that we did receive, we included in the RFP as optional and received pricing on, such as agenda management and potentially public records management, those sorts of things. So we will be negotiating those among staff and then bringing the contract back to you all for final approval. At that point, if any budget modifications are necessary, we would recommend those to you at that time.
I have a question. If and when we do decide to move forward with this, is the website going to be down when it's being revamped?
No. The live website will continue running. That will run parallel during the implementation until the new one is ready to launch.
Perfect.
I would just like to add, thank you, Jacob, for all your work on this. Mike will, he'll confirm that this is something I've been talking to Mike about for quite some time. And so I'm glad to see that we're finally going to be moving forward with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Well, that covers the 4 items that we had on the agenda, but there's still 2 items that I'd like to talk to council about. The first one is with regards to property disposition. There's going to be an item that comes to council next Tuesday for your consideration, and it's looking to make a change to our current disposition policies with regards to property. If you take a look at our current codes right now, it basically says if we're going to get rid of any property, it doesn't really differentiate what we mean when we say property. It says we need to dispose of it by either auction or another competitive process, period, and that's it. It doesn't take into account that when we're dealing with real estate, There may be different things that we want to do with the real estate that go outside the realm of an auction. In particular, to give you a bit of an example, there's currently a very small 8x5, I believe is the dimensions, a very small 8x5 parcel that is being requested to rejoin back to its originating parcel east of A1A. And unfortunately, the way the policy is currently written, the city can't do that. The city would have to take that parcel and go to auction, and someone could obviously buy it and start treating it as a spite strip for the remainder of the property. So we're going to be bringing back a revision to the purchasing policy for you to consider. What that policy is effectively going to say is, if it is a non-conforming parcel and the valuation is less than the current purchasing authority for the city of $25,000, that we can administratively dispose of it in what we feel is the best and most responsible way. Anything that is a conforming parcel or greater in valuation than $25,000 would need to come back to council for a discussion of what is the right way to dispose of the property. There's more parcels beside that one that we are looking to dispose of in the coming months. In particular, the CRA has indicated that they would like to get rid of a single family residential parcel that's on the south end of Horn Court, just north of Riptide. And the city also has 5 parcels on Sunshine Court, which have been vacant for about the past 4 or 5 years, even though they are ready to be developed on. And we'd like to talk to council at a future time about what conditions we would put on the sale of those properties and how we should dispose of them. Should we dispose of them in bulk? Should we dispose of them individually? Should we instill clawback provisions that if they're not developed for residential housing within a certain period of time, that we take those properties back at the same price with which we sold them? So I just wanted to give you all the heads up that that'll be on the next council meeting. When you receive the agenda packets and you've had a chance to look at that one-page policy that we've written up, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm trying to keep things moving with regards to the issue of real estate with regards to the city. And I think that that's the best way we can keep doing it going forward. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is with regards to vaccines. I believe that each of you as council members have probably seen or may even have been individually contacted by seniors within our community. I know we've received some emails here at City Hall with a lot of questions about what's going on with vaccinations. In addition to that, Mayor Hoffman has been in contact with the other 2 beach mayors, Elaine Brown and Ellen Glasser, and they in turn have been in contact with the city of Jacksonville to try and get additional information as well. We've had Jacob Board prepare a press statement that we're planning on putting out to our website and social media that basically speaks on behalf of all 3 beach communities. That basically says we're not in charge of the vaccinations. This is actually controlled by the state of Florida and the Duval County Health Department, but that there are priorities put in place from the governor's office to focus on long-term care facilities, persons 65 years of age or older, healthcare personnel with direct patient contact, and persons deemed to be extremely vulnerable to COVID-19 by hospital providers. So we're looking at putting this statement out, and we just wanted to let you know this is the direction that we're going in. Obviously, if council wanted to do anything more than this, we could. But again, the actual application of vaccines is outside of our control. That's being controlled by the health department. And with that, I think we'd open it up for any conversation that you'd want to have as to what else we do as an organization going forward.
Yes.
Shared screen.
I was in contact with Pablo Towers, and the lady told me Walgreens on Beach and 3rd is getting vaccines, but it's only for the Pablo Tower residents. She said she was going to email me and let me know when they come in. And there's another, briefly talked to our council member Rory Diamond about having area at the beaches, and he said he is just working on it and he's doing his best. That's all I have on my end for the vaccines.
Mayor Hoffman, is there anything you'd like to add with regards to your conversations with the other beach mayors or the opportunity for a vaccination site here on the beaches side of the ditch?
I mean, I'm sure everyone can appreciate that this is a really complicated process, and it's going through a couple of different ways. The hospitals have been given certain allotments, and even Mike and I do a call weekly with Beaches Baptist, and they're not even the Beaches Baptist Hospital is not even a site for vaccines at this time, even for their own constituencies. So I think that if we can all, and that's why I wanted this statement to be put together so that we could all be consistent in the messaging, in that really the only thing that I can see us helping with is potentially providing a location and getting the word out if there were a beaches location, and then advocating on the back end if that becomes an opportunity. But right now the supply is inconsistent. It goes week by week to how much each of the locations that are currently operating will even get. So we're just in a lot of a wait and see. So I think the main thing is if we can all just kind of be consistent in the information that we're pushing out, and just encourage patients, and most of all, encourage people just to continue to be vigilant in terms of social distancing and mask wearing and all of that good stuff. I think to me, that's the best that we can do at this point.
Any other thoughts from council on this topic? Obviously, we can relay more information as we get it. But like the mayor indicated, right now, we've not heard anything with regards to a vaccination site on the beaches, let alone in Jack's Beach. And even our local healthcare provider doesn't have up-to-date information either, or information that shows a continuous stream of vaccines coming into the area. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with this tri-party notification. So this will hopefully be something that all three beach communities put up on their social media and their websites. And as we get more information, hopefully all three will continue to update it in unison as well.
Hey, Mike, I do have a question. I have heard some people that are going to Mayo Clinic to get vaccines. And I don't know if that's maybe because they have primary care providers there, and maybe that's how they're doing that. But I didn't know if that was something we could try to see if we could get some information to see if there's a public option there. Does anybody know?
I've not heard of Mayo being a public option. The only public options that I've heard of so far are the ones that you see in this briefing that we've put out, or that we're getting ready to put out. And just the fact that Beaches Baptist indicated their short-term plan is not to have the Beaches Baptist Hospital be a vaccination site. For those of you on the call, you may recall that each of the different vaccines that are out there have two different refrigeration requirements. One of them is a commercial refrigeration requirement, which is about -4 degrees, but the other one is somewhere in the -30+ degrees, which is special refrigeration. So Beaches Baptist indicated that when they do start rolling out their vaccines from their facilities, they will be focusing on their downtown hospital and the Southside Hospital as their points of distribution to the public, rather than try to duplicate refrigeration systems throughout all of the different healthcare facilities. So no, I've not heard of that being a public option, and I've not heard of any public options out here in the beaches yet either.
At this point, I haven't heard of any of the hospitals being a public option, but I think that it sounded like that's the ultimate goal once their employees and their patients and their with Mayo, their regular patients are vaccinated, that would be the next step once they get to that point. But I don't think, other than maybe UF Health, I don't think that any of the other hospitals have gone to a public at this point.
If there's no other questions on this topic, I think that concludes our briefing for the night.
Mike, real quick, can we just make sure that we get a copy of that statement as soon as you're ready to put it out, and that way those of us on social media and stuff can go ahead and get it out so that there can be a lot of sharing 'cause I know we're all getting fielding questions on that.
I know Jacob can hear us because he's still on the call. So Jacob, once we have this finalized and we're ready to go to print, if you can please also distribute that to all of the council, that would be appreciated.
Yep, I'll send it out. And I think what would make the most sense, if, you know, depending on your social media preferences, would be to reshare what the City of Jacksonville Beach page shares, if you're open to that.
I see a lot of heads nodding. That's a good thing.
And I think we'll do that tomorrow, Mike, because we're emailing it to the other two cities in the morning. So I'll email you all when it goes live.
Sounds good. Well, with that being said, thank you all for attending tonight's briefing. Reminder, we have a council meeting in person next Tuesday on the 19th because Monday is a holiday. So for the public that might be watching or watching this at a later time, that meeting will start on Tuesday at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers. We'll see you.